Welcome back to my little channel. I'm going to respond to a video from TEDx. There was an old TEDx video from October 2012. Are brains of males and females the same? Or rather, Daphna Joel, are brains male or female? Now, Daphna Joel is someone with a PhD in psychology, so she studied more than I did, I won't lie. And she is, well, at the time she was the head of the psychobiology graduate program at the School of Psychological Sciences. She's not a neuroscientist, by the way, but it's all part of it, never mind that. And she claims that male and female brains are the same. But are they?
Did you know that 15 minutes of stress are enough to change the sex of some regions of the brain from the male form to the female form, or from the female form to the male form?
So you are saying there are differences, but the brain can adapt based on the stress levels it is in? Really? That sounds interesting. But then wouldn't that also admit that there are differences? Because if there weren't any differences, there wouldn't be a male form or a female form. Or would there be?
I didn't know that either. But when I discovered this fact, it transformed the way I was thinking about sex and brain.
I guess I must have missed it, but all I heard so far is an assertion that stress can cause male brains to temporarily, or parts of a male brain, sorry, parts, you did say parts, of a male brain function like a female brain or vice versa. But that's an assertion. And even if that assertion were true, that assertion starts with the premise that there are male and female brains. So, are there male and female brains? Or are you trying to pull a fast one?
It all started about 4 years ago, when I decided to give a course on the psychology of gender. I stayed home for almost a year and read books and scientific papers on the development of men and women from the moment of conception. As a neuroscientist, I was of course interested in the relation between sex and brain. I soon found out that many scientists, just like most of us, believe that there are male brains and female brains,
which time and again have been proven to be true. Male brains tend to have more grey cells. I say tend to, but no, it's not tend to. Male brains have more grey cells, where female brains have more white cells. This also means that men on average are better at certain things because of their grey cells, and women are better at certain other things because of their white cells, because grey cells are more task-oriented and white cells are more emotion-oriented. It's an oversimplification, I agree, but it is a visible difference. I'm not even talking about measurable or discoverable. This is visible. If you would die and all they would find was your brain, then they would know the victim was a woman. Not much else, obviously, but at least that. Well, you're a neuroscientist, so I assume you know way more about this stuff than I do, but at the same time, I can't help but feel that you kind of don't, or you're lying, or you're making stuff up. Because, let's be honest, if there are fundamental differences between men and women, which I'm not going to argue whether they are or not, because that's a completely different story, these fundamental differences are more than just whether their brain is the same, which the brain isn't. So even if it were the same, then there is still more to it, because not every man is the same as every other man, not every woman is the same as every other woman, even though they have roughly the same brain. Seriously, you're a psychologist. You know there is more to behavior and cognitive processes than just simple brain functions. Why are you trying to make this sound that there is this, well, dichotomy between men and women, which claims that there's differences in the brain, but there really isn't, but they can change based on stress. I'm sorry, you're both contradicting yourself and obviously confusing the truth and reality with what you want it to be. I mean, never mind evolution, never mind the fact that we have researched this stuff, never mind that we can find physical differences in a male and a female brain consistently. Never mind all of those things. Please continue.
And that this is the reason for the fundamental differences between men and women. According to a very popular version of this story, the female brain has a large emotion center and a large communication center. It is hardwired for empathy. The male brain, on the other hand, has a large aggression center and a large sex center. It is hardwired for building systems.
Yeah, sorry, but oversimplification is oversimplified. I don't want to be rude, but how does aggression and sex equate to wanting to build stuff? There's obviously more to it, don't you think?
Maybe you have sort of something else, but this is a scientific theory after all.
At least someone chuckled at your joke, so it must have been not too bad, I guess.
This is a very popular theory or very popular story because it gives us a very simple explanation to the world we live in. It explains why women are more sensitive and emotional and men more aggressive and sexual. Why most teachers are women and most engineers men.
Once again, you seem to fail reality in this one. Yes, currently most women are teachers, but there's a reason for that. Because on average, teachers don't get paid that much and men get frowned upon when they work with children. Hell, men have to actually defend why they work with children because of sexuality issues which are being, well, propped up, being imagined. And don't worry, women don't have that problem. We see a problem in our current schooling system that on average, boys and girls need both men and women to teach them, but in our schooling system, we don't see a lot of men. Then again, if a man would try to get a job as a teacher, they often, well, get frowned upon. And on the other hand, if we look at technology engineering, this is something men on average excelled in, well, for as far back as history goes. Funny enough, if we go back in history, teachers usually were men. So something changed in the last, let's say, 100 years. I wonder what that is. Well, I have a theory, but let's not go there just yet, shall we?
Already in the womb, the story continues, a huge surge of testosterone transforms the brain of the male fetus from the default female form to the male form. So boys are born with a male brain, and girls are born with a female brain.
So there is a male brain and there is a female brain. Thank you for proving that. I guess we're done here, right? But we can't be, because your video lasts at least another 10 minutes. Okay, continue.
Whereas the notion of a male brain and the female brain fits well the popular view of men from Mars, women from Venus, it does not fit scientific data, which tell us that men and women are remarkably similar.
Yes, men and women are remarkably similar, but at the same time there are some remarkable differences as well. And you're trying to deny those differences by saying, well, we're almost the same. Yeah, but we're not though, are we? As I said earlier, men tend to use their grey cells more, women use their white cells more. Women use both half of their brains on nearly all tasks, where men specialize on the task they're doing. Men tend to be focused, problem-solving driven, where women tend to be more emotional and recognizing emotional patterns. These are differences. These are evolutionary differences. This is not about, well, it's almost the same, because yes, of course we're almost the same. We're the fucking same species. What are you going to compare us to? If not to each other, well, there are differences, but they're not a lot. Yeah, but it's the differences that count. Hell, there are differences between men and men, or women and women. But there are less differences between men and men than there are between men and women, especially when it comes to brains. Not two brains are the same, kind of like a fingerprint, more or less. But the differences are there. But yeah, they're still, well, let's say 99% comparable. Well, men to men and women to women. Men to women, the differences are a little bit bigger than 1%. But you're trying to deny that these are fundamental differences because there are not a lot of them. But you know what? They are still fundamental. There are still huge differences between the male brain and the female brain. As I said earlier, if you die and you lose your brain, someone can pick up your brain and can recognize that that brain is a female brain. This is not just me saying that. I'm sorry, I'll get you a link for it or anything.
In the past 50 years or so, over 50,000 papers have been published on sex differences in psychology. I haven't read them all, even a year is not enough, but others have. And their conclusion, based on this enormous number of studies, is that men and women are highly similar in almost everything psychologists can measure.
Well, that depends highly on who and what you read. And let us not forget that for the last, let's say, 50 to 70 years, feminist theory has basically been worming their way into the soft sciences, and psychology is one of the soft sciences.
Intellectual abilities, cognitive abilities, emotional abilities, personality characteristics, interests, and attitudes.
And the worst part of it is that we see that the more a society is safe and goes towards equality, we see women tending to go deeper into those differences, not into the equalities. For example, in the Western world, we have more women on universities than men, yet women still don't go STEM. So there is that. Which is funny, because if we look at, well, I wouldn't say third world, but less developed countries, we see women trying to study STEM constantly. So with equality comes the choice, and with the choice, women choose to go into the soft sciences. And not just the soft sciences, the easier schooling thingies as well. So maybe those differences aren't just perceived, maybe those differences are quite actual, and they are being promoted by claiming that they're forced upon them, which is funny because it doesn't make sense. Yeah, okay, I'm sorry, it's not really funny. It's a problem, and feminism is, in my humble opinion, the cause of this problem. And feminism, to me, seems your motivation, which I think is a problem. Did I mention that? I guess I did.
There are only a few domains in which consistent sex differences are found. For example, men are, on average, not all of them, but on average, more aggressive than women. So we call aggression a masculine trait.
Yeah, that's funny. We keep calling aggression a masculine trait, where research time and again has proven that women tend to be more aggressive than men. Yet men are stronger, therefore when men do fight, the damages are bigger. But if we look at domestic violence, for example, women are 60% of the victims, but roughly 80% of the instigators, which kind of proves that men aren't the aggressor always. I'm not saying men are never the aggressor, don't get me wrong, but very often they are not. This is mostly shown in the following thing. There is a huge problem with domestic violence. I'm going to use domestic violence because it's easier. Yeah, there's aggression from men and there's aggression from women in domestic violence. Yeah, but in heterosexual couples, men are often seen as the perpetrator. Okay, fair enough, I can live with that. It's not true, but I can live with that. Now, if we look at gay couples, for example, female-to-female gay couples, domestic violence shoots up. It gets a lot higher than in heterosexual couples. Now, if men are the cause of this, we would assume to see the same, or even more than the same, in male-to-male gay couples. But, surprise, surprise, in male-to-male gay couples, domestic violence plummets, where on average domestic violence happens in about 15 to 20% of all households, roughly, depending on which study you follow. Female-to-female domestic violence scores highest at roughly 25%, where male-to-male domestic violence doesn't even get into double digits. They stay around 8 to 9%. Now, I should probably link on that downstairs as well. So, yeah, I will. Continue, please.
Women are, on average, more compassionate than men. So we call this a feminine trait. But also in these domains, the men and women are highly similar.
Even though reality proves that this is not the case. Once again, I point back to the numbers of the domestic violence thingy, where women on women tend to be far more aggressive than anything else, but children are more likely to die from the hands of their mother than of the hands of their father. Yet we claim fathers are the great beaters of children. There is a strong dissonance between reality and what you're telling us.
And the differences are very small.
Nope, you're not telling the truth to us, my dear.
Even more important, we now know that each of us is a unique mosaic of both masculine and feminine characteristics. We are not all masculine and not all feminine. I guess you already knew that, not about me, but about yourself, that you have a feminine side and a masculine side.
Confusing the matter again, my dear. Feminine and masculine may be traits, but they have nothing to do with the shape or functioning of the brain. Yes, some people are more feminine than masculine. Yes, some people are more masculine than feminine. Some people are more introvert. Some people are more extrovert. It doesn't mean anything. People are individuals. Of course, every person is different. That still doesn't explain whether male and female brains are the same or not. Ugh, why are you bringing this up? This means nothing. You're just confusing the whole situation once again.
I will come back to this image of ourselves as a unique mosaic of masculine and feminine characteristics a little later. But now let's go back to the brain. Already at the end of the 19th century, scientists discovered a difference between the brains of men and the brains of women.
So, they are not the same. Well, thanks for pointing that out.
They discovered that the brains of men were, on average, larger than the brains of women. Some scientists took this as evidence to support and explain the then widely held belief that men are smarter than women.
It is true that this has been asserted and is basically bullshit, because we do know that women, even before this day and age, before that day and age, went to university, for example, and the size of the brain isn't the important bit. I mean, whales have bigger brains than humans. Elephants have bigger brains than humans. Are they smarter? One could argue it, of course, but I haven't seen any elephant rocket scientists. That's all I can say about it. So yeah, no, the size of the brain does not equate intelligence. And everyone knows this. Well, everyone that matters. Even back then, people kind of ignored that.
One scientist even went as far as stating that women, because of their small brain, do not have the intellectual and academic skills necessary for academic studies. If this logic sounds familiar, this is not an accident. This is the same belief we started with. that men and women are fundamentally different because men have male brains and women have female brains.
Yeah, I'm kind of still wondering when you're going to go and explain to us why that's not true, why male and female brains are the same. Because everything you said so far kind of proves they're not.
However, this is an old version of the myth, so it sounds absurd. To date, when women not only go to universities, but outnumber men at all levels of academic studies, it sounds ridiculous that scientists could have believed that women could not go to universities because their brains were on average smaller than the brains of men.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, women go to universities more than men in this current day and age, yet they still do not outnumber men in the hard sciences. They do not outnumber men in STEM. And even though, yes, they thought women were less smart because of, on average, the smaller brain, which is still the case, that has nothing to do with intelligence. Women went to university before they found that. I mean, do I have to give you examples of women that went to university? Really? Are you that daft? I'm sorry, this is infuriating. You are pushing a narrative, and the facts be damned. Damn it, woman, I thought you were a scientist.
Now, don't get me wrong. Women's brains are still on average smaller than men's brains. What has changed is not the size of the brain. What has changed is social norms and laws that prohibited and disencouraged women from studying.
Yeah, I'm going to have to give you a name, don't I? Because I have to prove you wrong once again. And I'm not a neuroscientist. Fucking hell. Okay, this isn't about neuroscientists. This is about whether women could go to universities or not. Now, we know that as far back as in the Middle Ages, women could go to universities. It didn't happen often, I won't lie, but it was possible. But I'm going to give you one example. Maria Salomea Skłodowska-Curie. Now, a lot of people might not know that name, but if I to say Madame Curie, then suddenly everyone knows, or at least a lot of people know. She got 2 Nobel Prizes, she coined the phrase radioactivity. Yeah, she's a big deal. Oh, and you know what? She was a woman.
In the more than 100 years that have passed, scientists continue to discover differences between the brains of males and females in both humans and animals. For example, compared to men, women have a thicker cortex, a higher proportion of gray matter, and a lower proportion of white matter.
I've always learned that men had more gray matter and women had less white matter. But it doesn't matter. Basically what you're saying, there are 3 reasons already that there's a physical difference, once again, between male and female brains. How many times are you going to prove that there is a difference between male and female brains on this one talk? I mean, it's almost as if we're both on the same side by saying there's a difference between a male and a female brain, and then you go on like, yeah, but there really isn't. But you're the one that's giving me the examples that there are differences. Come off it.
Compared to women, men have larger ventricles. These big holes you see in the brain. I see that some of you that were very happy to discover about the fact that men have bigger brains than women are not really happy with this discovery.
Those empty spaces are meant for cerebrospinal fluid, which is basically a way to protect your brain from impact damage on the bone structure. Never mind, it has other uses as well, but the fact that it's this big is a good thing, not a bad thing. They are not holes. They have a function. For fuck's sake, You're a neuroscientist. I shouldn't be explaining this to you. What the fuck are you doing to us? Why are you lying like this? I'm getting really frustrated here.
And I can understand this because if you believe, like the scientists from the 19th century, that the size of the brain matters, then indeed you will be embarrassed to discover that your bigger brains come together with a bigger, what shall we call them, empty spaces. But I want to convey the message that this is all nonsense. Men do just fine with their larger ventricles. Just as women do just fine with their smaller brains. We now know of hundreds of differences between the brains of men and women. Not just differences in the size, as I've just shown you, but also differences in the microanatomy of the brain, and I'll show you an example shortly. And as more and more differences have been discovered, the belief that there is a male brain and the female brain has become stronger and stronger, because everyone was taking for granted the assumption that these differences were adding one to the other, as I've depicted in this figure. At first, this sounded completely logical to me. There are many differences between the brains of males and females, so there must be a male brain and a female brain. But then I read the paper I told you about in the beginning, the one that found that stress can change the sex of the brain. And I realized that this logic was flawed.
And now we come to the crux of the matter. Every piece of evidence is pointing in one direction, but that's not the direction you want it to point. Therefore, you decide it's flawed. Whatever happened with science being about the data? No, it's very clear. It's feels over reals. Thank you for pointing that out.
Let's look at this study together. In this study, the researchers were interested in the effects of stress on a brain region called the hippocampus. They measured the density of dendritic spines. You see here a dendrite with its a neuron, with its dendrite, and the small red dots are the dendritic spines. And here we can see an actual dendrite from a male rat and a dendrite from a female rat. And I added red arrows so it is easier to detect the spines. And we can clearly see a sex difference. Males have fewer spines compared to females. Cherish this moment. This is the first time you actually get to see a sex difference in the brain.
Yeah, no, obviously this is the first time that we get to see a difference in the male and female brain. Because that one is bigger than the other, yeah, that's not a difference. That one has a thicker cortex than the other. No, that's not a difference. One has more white cells than the other. Yeah, no, that doesn't mind. But this is the difference that really counts. And you know what? No, I'm going to wait a second.
So we can say that dendrites in this region have a male form, which is sparse spines, and a female form, which is dense spines. There was another group of rats in this study. These rats were stressed for 15 minutes, as long as this talk. So you can think what is happening to my brain now. And here we can see a dendrite from a stressed male and a dendrite from a stressed female. Strangely enough, the dendrite from the stressed male has what we have just termed the female form, that is, lots of spines. And the dendrite from the stressed female has what we have just termed the male form, which is few spines. So we see that the form of dendrites in this region depends on sex. It is different in males and in females. But it does not depend only on sex. Knowing that the dendrite you are looking at is from a female is not enough to predict the form of the dendrite, whether it will have few spines or lots of spines. To predict this, you also need to know whether this female was under stress or wasn't.
So the other differences don't matter because this one fits your narrative. I don't get it. Yes, they're dendritics. Yes, they have more spines in women than on men. on average. And yes, when men are stressed, it turns the other way around. And when women are stressed, it turns the other way around. This means that we don't 100% understand why they do that. It has nothing to do with being man or woman. It means that the brains work differently. When a man is stressed, his cells basically start working more like a woman. When a woman is stressed, her cells start to work more like a man. Don't you then understand that when the situation differs from the previous situation, the cells start working differently? But they do so both on men and women, which basically still means they're the fucking same.
So although sex is important, it is the interaction of sex and environment, in this case stress, that determines the form of neurons in this region.
I'm not quite sure why you want to put sex on a dendrite, but fair enough, you can, I don't give a fuck. But the fact that when a man is stressed, it changes, and when a woman is stressed, it changes, basically means that for men and women, the reaction is the same, but both the starting point and the ending point are different. So a male dendrite doesn't become a female dendrite, or a female dendrite doesn't become a male dendrite. They just exert on stress in different ways. Seriously.
As you may imagine, I was very surprised by this study. So I started to look for other similar studies. It wasn't really hard to find them. There were studies reporting similar effects of stress when the stress was experienced in utero, just after birth, and in adulthood. There were also similar effects following other manipulations. For example, whether the rats were housed individually or in groups, whether they had things to play with or didn't. The different manipulations affected many brain regions, not just the hippocampus, and many features of the brain, such as the size, number of neurons, and dendritic morphology, as I've just shown you.
I'm struggling here because at one point I want to finish this video because the double standards, the dissonance between reality and what this woman is saying is pretty much frustrating. But at the same time, maybe I should just finish it all and come with arguments. And I know this video won't have a lot of views because this might be too specialistic or whatever. I don't care. I'm going to go through with this. Okay, so you notice that stress can have an influence on the development of a brain, which we already know because stress is also one of the major factors for schizophrenia. Yes, you have to have a genetic disposition, but the genetic disposition is not enough. You need a trigger. This trigger is often stress. This is why we see, for example, schizophrenia often happening during the late teenage years when stress in life becomes bigger. I can give you other examples. Do you need them? Because it seems that you, as a psychologist and neuroscientist, lack this knowledge. And I don't understand how that's possible. I'm not a neuroscientist and I know this crap.
What was common to all of these studies was the finding that whatever the manipulation, some features of the brain changed their sex and some didn't. You may be wondering now, so what is the meaning of talking about the sex of a brain region if we see that simple manipulations can reverse what is male and what is female? You are absolutely right. It is meaningless to talk of a male form and a female form. It makes much more sense, it's much more reasonable and rational to use informative terms such as sparse versus dense, high versus low, long versus short. But I will continue to use this male-female terminology because this will help me make my point clear.
Yeah, that's true. You're going to use this terminology because it helps you to make your point clear. And your point is there is no difference between males and females because male dendrites turn into female dendrites and female dendrites turn into male dendrites when they're under stress. But then under stress, male and female dendrites are still different from one another. And you ignore all the other things that are different in the male brain and the female brain, and you come up with something else that's different in the male brain and female brain, and then try to make it sound as this is the same. I'm sorry, but in an equal amount of stress, the dendrites of men and the dendrites of women are different. And that they might switch doesn't really matter, because in the end, once they've switched, they're still different. Don't you get this? Everyone that's born is a mosaic of what you call female and male characteristics. That's okay, because that's what humans are. But this is why you want to call the dendrites male and female instead of long and short, because it fits your narrative. A dendrite has no gender, has no sex. You assigned one because it fits your narrative. I cannot believe that there are actually people out there that take your study serious. Because what you're doing is you're proving that there are differences between male and female brains, and whilst proving that there are differences, claiming that they are the same. Can you please stop doing that?
Let's go back now to the male fetus and to the testosterone surge that is transforming his brain from the female form to the male form. And add only one component: stress. Picture the fetus mother. During the long weeks of pregnancy, she sometimes experiences stress. Not all the time, but sometimes she experiences stress. Whenever she does, some features of her fetus brain change their sex. So when her boy is born, his brain is a mosaic of both male and female characteristics. This mosaic is uniquely his, molded by the complex interactions of his hormones with the environment he has been living in up until now. The same is true for the female fetus. Her brain is also molded by complex interactions of hormones and environment, so that the little girl is also born with a mosaic or brain mosaic composed of female and male characteristics.
Yes, you are 100% correct. Every boy born is an individual based on whatever shaped him. And yes, every girl born is an individual based on whatever shaped her. I mean, seriously, yes, this is not the point. This is not what we've been talking about. This is not what you've been talking about. Is there a difference between a male brain and a female brain? Yes, there is. You've proven there is, and yet still you continue that there isn't. Come off it.
So we see that we are already born with a brain which is neither male nor female. It is intersex, that is a mixture of both male and female characteristics.
Now you want to add intersex into this bullshit? Oh, for fuck's sake. This is why you want to call the dendrites male and female, so that you can claim something. There is nothing male or female about the dendrites, and there is nothing intersex about having a mix of them. There's nothing intersex about having a mix of characteristics. This is why science, especially the soft sciences, are failing as hard as they are. This cannot hold up on scrutiny. And unfortunately, I'm not a neuroscientist, but for fuck's sake, anyone who watches this, feel free to use anything you see, because unfortunately, even though I'm not a neuroscientist, the points I'm making are fucking accurate. I'm sorry. This is beyond stupid.
This, or our intersex brain, will continue to change throughout our life as a result of our unique experiences. We can now add to the image of ourselves as a unique mosaic of masculine and feminine characteristics, the image of our brain being a unique mosaic of male and female characteristics. I will close with this. Many people believe that there are male brains and female brains, because this belief gives them an explanation to why men and women are so different and why they should behave differently and be treated differently. I have shown you today that it is meaningless to talk of the sex of the brain. Brains do not have sex. If you must relate to the brain's sex, you can call it intersex, a mixture of male and female characteristics. There are no male brains and no female brains. Therefore, their existence cannot explain fundamental differences between men and women, which is not really a big problem considering the fact that men and women are remarkably similar. Be yourself.
And then, in the end, of course, she has to say that men and women are not different. But the thing is, men and women are different. We shouldn't expect to be the same. There are many a difference between men and women. Now, should men and women be equal? Yes, of course. Don't get me wrong. Men are stronger than women, but that doesn't mean women are weak. Women are better with emotions. That doesn't mean men are emotionless. I can give other examples. I'm not even going to be bothered anymore. This took very long, and it pisses me off a little bit. And I know, I mean, the original video was 14 minutes, and this one is a lot longer than that, I know. But the stupidity, the outright lies, and this, well, it's a TEDx talk, so maybe I shouldn't have expected more from a TEDx talk. It's not a TED talk, so there is that. She proves time and again that there are differences between male brains and female brains. But instead of saying, okay, well, there are certain things that are the same and there are certain things that are different, she's going to pretend that, well, yeah, but there aren't any differences because these similarities. Yeah, but these similarities aren't similarities. I mean, the similarity is that both male brains and female brains have white and grey brain cells. Well, there's a similarity. And they have a cortex. There's a similarity. Yeah, but the cortex in women, as you said yourself, is bigger than the cortex in men. The ventricles are bigger in men than they are in women. It doesn't really matter much. There are differences. That's the whole point. And then you come about the dendritic cells and you say like, well, yeah, I could have called them longer and shorter, but yeah, no, I'm going to call them male and female because it fits the narrative better. Because then I can claim in the end, see, we're all intersex, even though we fucking ain't. There is nothing wrong with being a man. There's nothing wrong with being a woman. Why do people like you keep pushing the narrative that, oh no, we're all the same? Well, men are more masculine and they have more aggression, but we're all the same. This is cringeworthy. This is pissing me off. I really have a hard time not to swear. And unfortunately, I have sweared a few times here. I know, I'm sorry for that. Another thing I'm sorry for, this is a very long version. I will make a shorter version of this as well. But yeah, I did want to do the whole video to show people that I'm not taking anything out of context. I haven't. I should have, because then I would have been done a lot faster. She has, however, she has taken things out of context. Hell, she takes things out of context, claims that she takes them out of context, and continues with it anyway. Oh yeah, but women use their white cells more, men use their grey cells more. Women have a bigger cortex than men, but there's no difference between a male and a female brain. But you just named one. One that's physical, that we can see, that we can feel, but it's not a different. Well, yeah, and men brain, well, on average they're bigger, which is a difference. Yeah, but that one doesn't count, because it doesn't fit my narrative. And men have bigger ventricles, but that's not important, because it doesn't fit my narrative. No, the dendrites, they do something. And because they do that, I can call it male and female, because when males, etc., well, I shouldn't call them male, female. I should call them short and long. But you know what? No, I'm going to keep calling them. You are so full of your narrative. Let's call it that. let's not say shit, let's say you are so full of your narrative that you keep lying, you keep pointing into a certain direction. And I'm rambling now, I'm ranting now. I should stop. I am going to stop. Please like, share and subscribe if you feel inclined to. This is something you might want to share with anyone you know interested in psychology or neuropsychology or neuroscience, because, hey, this is interesting stuff. Unfortunately, scientists like Madame Joel are the bane to what our soft sciences have become. I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a neuroscientist, I'm a sociotherapist. I work in the field, and there's a reason that a lot of people, it's not that they look weird upon us because, oh, you're so brave for doing this job. But at the same time, it's not a real job, is it? I mean, you don't really get tired from this work, do you? It's not as if you use your brain or your hands or your whatnot. People like Daphna Joel kind of make it clear why people are thinking that. The double standards and the lies are huge. Anyway, like, share, subscribe if you feel so inclined. I would love to see you subscribe. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them under it. I will try to answer it as good and as fair as I can. And I hope to see you all next time, if the length of this video hasn't scared you away for good. Anyway, have a great time, people. See you all next time.